You think marching back and forth makes you a real soldier? I bled for this country while you're out here playing dress-up for tourists.
Today you'll learn about the story of Marcus Thompson, a decorated Vietnam veteran whose moment of disrespect at Arlington National Cemetery led to an unforgettable encounter that would change his perspective forever. Get ready for a narrative, full of emotion and unexpected turns. Before we begin this incredible story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're listening to this story from. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine grounds of Arlington National Cemetery as Marcus Thompson walked slowly along the winding pathways. At 68 years old, his weathered face bore the lines of a man who had seen too much, experienced too much, and lost too much. The Purple Heart pinned to his worn leather jacket caught the early light, a reminder of the shrapnel that had torn through his leg in the jungles of Vietnam 45 years ago. Marcus had come to Arlington for the same reason he visited every year on this date, to honor his fallen brothers who never made it home. But today felt different. Today, the weight of his own struggles seemed heavier than usual. The nightmares had been getting worse. The VA benefits weren't enough to cover his mounting medical bills, and the world seemed to have forgotten about veterans like him. As he approached the tomb of the unknown soldier, Marcus felt a familiar surge of bitterness. There, standing motionless in perfect military bearing, was one of the elite tomb guards, a young soldier, probably no older than 25, dressed in an immaculate uniform that had never seen real combat. The guard's movements were precisely calculated, almost robotic as he performed the ceremonial changing of the guard. Marcus stopped and watched, his jaw tightening. Here was this kid, playing soldier in front of tourists, receiving praise and recognition for what Marcus saw as nothing more than an elaborate performance. Meanwhile, real veterans like himself struggled in obscurity, their sacrifices forgotten, by a society that preferred ceremony over substance. The crowd of visitors watched in respectful silence as the guard executed his 21 steps, turned with military precision, and began his march back across the sacred ground. Marcus felt something snap inside him. All the years of pain, and all the nights of sleepless terror, all the friends who had died in his arms, and this was what America chose to honor, a dance routine. Without thinking, Marcus stepped forward, his voice cutting through the reverent silence like a blade. "Hey, soldier boy," he called out, his words echoing across the marble plaza. "Nice show you got there. Real impressive. For someone who's never heard a shot fired in anger." The effect was immediate and electric. Every head in the crowd turned toward Marcus, faces showing a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and outrage. Tourists began whispering among themselves, some pulling out their phones to record what was clearly about to become a confrontation. The sacred atmosphere of the tomb had been shattered by Marcus's bitter words. The tomb guard, specialist, James Rodriguez, continued his measured pace without so much as a flicker of acknowledgement. His training had prepared him for this moment. Disruptions were rare but not unheard of. The 21 steps continued, each one deliberate and unwavering, his rifle held at the perfect angle, his bearing unchanged despite the verbal fair assault. Marcus felt his anger building as the young soldier ignored him completely. "You hear me, boy?" he shouted louder, his voice now carrying across the entire memorial area. "I'm talking to you. You think that little medal on your chest means something. You think marching back and forth makes you a real soldier." He pointed aggressively at his own Purple Heart, the metal catching the sunlight. "This here's a real medal, earned in real combat while you were probably still in diapers. I bled for this country while you're out here playing dress-up." For the tourists, the crowd was now visibly uncomfortable. Several visitors began moving away from Marcus, while others stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene or simply witness what was unfolding. An elderly woman clutched her husband's arm, her eyes wide with concern. A young father quickly ushered his children away from the scene, not wanting them to witness such disrespect at this hallowed ground. Still, Specialist Rodriguez continued. His duty, 21 steps. Turn, 21 steps back. His face remained a mask of professional composure, but those who knew him well might have noticed the slight tightening around his eyes. This wasn't just another day at the tomb for him. This was personal in ways the angry veteran couldn't possibly understand. Marcus's frustration reached a boiling point as his words seemed to have no effect on the stoic guard. "Look at me when I'm talking to you," he demanded, his voice cracking with emotion. "I fought in Vietnam. I watched my friends die. I came home to protesters spitting on my uniform, and now I got to watch kids like you get treated like heroes for putting on a show." The pain in Marcus's voice was raw and real. 45 years of suppressed anguish poured out in that moment. The guilt of surviving when others didn't, the shame of a war that ended in defeat, the loneliness of carrying invisible wounds that a grateful nation had chosen to forget. His hands shook as he spoke, not from age, but from the overwhelming emotion that threatened to consume him. "So you want to know what real service looks like?" Marcus continued, his voice now hoarse with emotion. "It's not this choreographed nonsense. It's watching 18-year-old kids take their last breath in a jungle on the other side of the world. It's coming home to a country that doesn't want to hear about what you've seen, what you've done, what you've lost." The tomb guard completed another cycle of his march, his movements still precise, still perfect. But something had changed in the atmosphere. The other guards stationed nearby had taken notice, and the tomb guard relief commander, Sergeant First Class Michael Chen, was making his way toward the disturbance with measured urgency. Sergeant First Class Chen approached the situation with the calm authority that came from years of military service and countless hours of training for exactly this type of incident. At 34, he had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and understood both the sacred nature of his current duty and the pain that drove veterans like Marcus to such desperate acts of defiance. As Chen drew closer, he could see the tears beginning to form in Marcus's eyes, though the older veteran fought to keep them from falling. The anger was still there, but underneath it was something much deeper, a profound sense of abandonment and forgotten sacrifice that Chen recognized all too well. "Sir," Chen said quietly, his voice carrying just enough authority to cut through Marcus's tirade without escalating the situation, "I'm going to need you to step back and lower your voice. This is a place of honor and respect." Marcus whirled around to face Chen, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Honor and respect," he spat. "Don't lecture me about honor, Sergeant. I was earning my stripes when you were still learning to tie your shoes. This whole thing is just a tourist attraction now. These boys don't know the first thing about real sacrifice." Chen studied Marcus carefully, taking in the Purple Heart, the weathered face, the trembling hands. He had encountered angry veterans before, but there was something different about this man, a depth of pain that spoke to experiences Chen could only imagine. The sergeant made a decision that would surprise everyone present, including Marcus himself. "You're right," Chen said simply, his words causing a ripple of shock through the gathered crowd. "Specialist Rodriguez there has never been in combat. Neither have most of the guards who serve here. But let me tell you something about that young man that you might not know." Marcus blinked, clearly not expecting this response. The crowd leaned in closer, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. Specialist Rodriguez volunteered for this duty after his older brother, Staff Sergeant Miguel Rodriguez, was killed by an IED in Kandahar 3 years ago, Chen continued, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Miguel was posthumously awarded the Silver Star for saving 6 members of his squad before the explosion took his life. James requested assignment to the tomb specifically to honor his brother's memory and the memory of all the unknown soldiers who never made it home. The color began to drain from Marcus's face as Chen's words sank in. Around them, the crowd had fallen completely silent, hanging on every word. "That young man you're calling a soldier boy wakes up every morning at 4 a.m. to prepare for this duty," Chen went on. "He spends hours polishing his uniform, inspecting his weapon, and studying the history of every conflict this nation has fought. He does this not for recognition or praise, but because he understands that he stands guard over the remains of soldiers who died in service to their country. Soldiers like the friends you lost in Vietnam." Marcus's hands had stopped shaking, and his aggressive posture began to soften as the full weight of Chen's revelation hit him. "Every step he takes, Every turn he makes, every moment he stands at attention, is his way of saying thank you to the men and women who paid the ultimate price, Chen continued. He may not have combat experience, but he carries the weight of their sacrifice every single day. And sir, with all due respect to your service and your sacrifice, that's not playing dress-up, that's honoring the dead. The silence that followed was profound. Marcus looked back at Specialist Rodriguez, who continued his solemn march, and for the first time he saw something different. The precise movements weren't robotic. They were reverent. The perfect posture wasn't for show, it was a physical manifestation of respect for the fallen. His brother Miguel, Chen added quietly, was the same age as many of the soldiers you served with in Vietnam. James knows that his brother's name is on a wall not far from here, but he also knows that there are thousands of soldiers whose names we'll never know, whose families never got closure, whose sacrifice might be forgotten if not for ceremonies. Like this. Marcus felt something break inside him, not in a destructive way, but like a dam finally giving way to release years of pent-up emotion. The anger that had sustained him for so long began to transform into something else entirely. The transformation in Marcus was visible to everyone present. His shoulders, which had been rigid with anger and defiance, began to sag as the weight of his misplaced fury settled upon him. He looked again at Specialist Rodriguez, who continued his ceremonial march with unwavering dedication, and Marcus began to see the young soldier through entirely different eyes. I didn't know, Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible above the gentle breeze that rustled through the trees surrounding the memorial. I thought he was just some kid playing soldier. Sergeant Chen stepped closer, his expression softening with understanding. Sir, may I ask your name and unit? Marcus Thompson, he replied, his voice still shaky. 1st Infantry Division, Vietnam, 1968 to 69. He paused, swallowing hard. I lost a lot of good men over there, boys who never got to come home, never got to have families, never got to see their 21st birthdays. Chen nodded respectfully. Thank you for your service, Mr. Thompson, and I'm sorry for your losses. Every soldier who serves here knows that we stand on the shoulders of veterans like you. The sacrifices you and your brothers made in Vietnam, whether the war was popular or not, whether you were welcomed home or not, those sacrifices matter. They're part of the foundation that allows us to serve today. Marcus felt tears finally, break free, fighting rolling down his weathered cheeks. I've been so angry for so long now, he admitted. Angry at the war, angry at the protesters, angry at the politicians, angry at a country that seemed to forget about us. When I see young soldiers like him getting respect and honor, I guess I felt forgotten. You're not forgotten, sir, Chen said firmly. Not by us, not by anyone who truly understands what service means. But let me tell you something else about Specialist Rodriguez that might surprise you. Marcus looked up, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Before his brother died, James was studying to become a teacher. He wanted to work with troubled kids, help them find direction in their lives. After Miguel's death, he enlisted specifically to serve at the tomb, but he hasn't given up on his dream of teaching. Thus, he spends his off-duty time volunteering at the local VA hospital, reading to wounded veterans, helping them write letters to their families, just sitting with the ones who don't have visitors. The crowd around them had grown larger, but the atmosphere had completely changed. What had begun as a confrontation had become something much more profound, a moment of understanding and healing that touched everyone present. He does that because his brother told him something before his final deployment, Chen continued. Miguel said that the real enemy isn't the person shooting at you. It's the isolation and abandonment that veterans feel when they come home. He made James promise that if anything happened to him, James would find a way to honor not just the dead, but the living veterans who were still fighting their own battles. Marcus stared at the young guard with new eyes, seeing not just the ceremony, but the heart behind it. He's honoring his brother by honoring all of us, Marcus said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. That's exactly right, sir, Chen confirmed. Every step he takes for Miguel. But he also takes it for you, for your friends who didn't come home, for every veteran who has ever felt forgotten or abandoned. This isn't just a ceremony, it's a promise that their sacrifice will never be forgotten. Marcus took a deep, shuddering breath and looked around at the faces watching him. He saw understanding in their eyes, not judgment. He saw respect, not condemnation. For the first time in years, he felt something he had almost forgotten. He felt seen. He felt valued. He felt remembered. What happened next would be remembered by everyone present for the rest of their lives. Marcus Thompson, the bitter Vietnam veteran who had come to Arlington carrying decades of pain and resentment, slowly walked toward the rope barrier that separated the public from the sacred ground where Specialist Rodriguez continued his solemn duty. With trembling hands, Marcus removed his Purple Heart from his jacket, the medal that had been both his pride and his burden, the symbol of his sacrifice and his pain, caught the afternoon sunlight as he held it reverently in his palm. The crowd watched in absolute silence as this broken man prepared to do something extraordinary. "Specialist Rodriguez," Marcus called out, his voice now filled with respect rather than anger. "I owe you an apology, son. I owe you and your brother and every soldier who has ever stood guard here an apology." For the first time since the confrontation began, Specialist Rodriguez acknowledged the disruption. Following protocol, he completed his 21 steps, executed a perfect about-face, and then did something that surprised even Sergeant Chen. He approached the rope barrier where Marcus stood waiting, his movement still precise, but now carrying a different energy, one of compassion and understanding. "Sir," Rodriguez said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "no apology is necessary. Your service and sacrifice in Vietnam paved the way for soldiers like me to serve today. It would be my honor to accept your words, but only if you understand that your service has never been forgotten, not by me, not by any of us who wear this uniform." Marcus looked into the young soldier's eyes and saw something he hadn't expected, genuine respect, understanding, and a maturity that belied his years. The anger that had consumed him for so long began to dissolve completely, replaced by something he hadn't felt in decades: hope. "Son, I want you to have this," Marcus said, extending the Purple Heart toward Rodriguez. "Not because I don't value it, but because I want you to know that what you're doing here matters. It matters to old soldiers like me, and it matters to the families of the men and women you're honoring." Rodriguez looked at the medal, then back at Marcus, his own eyes beginning to glisten with unshed tears. "Sir, I cannot accept your Purple Heart. You earned that with your blood and sacrifice, but I can promise you something. Every time I stand guard here, I'll remember this conversation. I'll remember that I'm not just honoring the unknown soldiers, but all the veterans who came home carrying invisible wounds, who fought battles long after the war ended." The young specialist paused, gathering his thoughts before continuing. "My brother Miguel used to tell me stories about Vietnam veterans he met during his deployments. He said they were some of the toughest, most resilient soldiers he'd ever encountered. He said they taught him that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing your duty even when you're terrified, even when the whole world seems to be against you." Marcus felt his knees weaken as the full impact of Rodriguez's words hit him. This young man, whom he had dismissed as a mere performer, understood more about his experience than most people Marcus had encountered in 45 years. "Miguel told me that if he ever didn't make it home, I should find a way to honor not just the fallen but the survivors," Rodriguez continued. "He said the real heroes are the ones who come back broken and find a way to keep living, keep serving you, keep believing in something bigger than themselves. Sir, you are one of those heroes." The two men stood facing each other across the rope barrier, representing different generations of American military service, connected by a bond that transcended age, conflict, and circumstance. Around them, the crowd had grown larger, but the atmosphere was one of reverence rather than spectacle. Many visitors were openly weeping, moved by the raw emotion and genuine reconciliation they were witnessing. Marcus slowly pinned his Purple Heart back to his jacket, but something fundamental had changed in how he wore it. It was no longer a burden of survivor's guilt, but a badge of honor that connected him to every soldier who had ever served. "Thank you, son," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for helping me remember what honor really looks like." Thank you for showing me that my pain doesn't have to define me, that my service still matters. As Specialist Rodriguez prepared to return to his post, he made one final gesture that would cement this moment in the hearts of everyone present. He came to attention and rendered a slow, deliberate salute to Marcus Thompson. Not the quick, perfunctory salute of military courtesy, but the deep, respectful salute reserved for fallen heroes and honored veterans. Marcus, his body remembering decades-old training, straightened his shoulders and returned the salute with military precision. For a moment, the two soldiers, separated by generations but united by service, stood in perfect military bearing, honoring each other and all who had served before them. As Rodriguez returned to his ceremonial duties, Marcus remained at the barrier, no longer seeing a performance but witnessing a sacred ritual of remembrance, the precise movements, the unwavering dedication, the solemn reverence. It all made sense now. This wasn't theater, this was worship. This wasn't show, this was service in its purest form. The crowd began to disperse slowly, but many stopped to shake Marcus's hand, to thank him for his service, to tell him that his sacrifice mattered. An elderly woman approached him with tears in her eyes. "My husband served in Vietnam too," she said softly. "He came home angry and hurt just like you. He never found his peace before he passed. Thank you for showing me what healing looks like." A young father with two small children approached next. "I want my kids to understand what real courage looks like," he said. "What happened here today, that took more courage than any battle. Thank you for showing them that it's never too late to find your way back to honor." Sergeant Chen approached Marcus one final time, his expression filled with respect and admiration. "Mr. Thompson, if you're interested, we have a program here at Arlington where veterans can volunteer to help with ceremonies and educational programs. We could use someone with your experience and your story to help other veterans understand what this place really means. We could use someone who understands both the pain of war and the power of healing." Marcus looked around at the pristine grounds, at the endless rows of white headstones, at the young soldiers who stood guard over America's honored dead. Each marker represented a story, a family, a sacrifice that deserved to be remembered. For the first time in decades, he felt a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, a sense of peace that he had thought was lost forever. "I'd like that, Sergeant," Marcus replied, his voice strong and clear. "I'd like that very much. Maybe it's time I stopped carrying my pain alone and started sharing my strength instead." As the sun began to set over Arlington National Cemetery, casting long shadows across the hallowed ground, Marcus Thompson walked slowly back along the winding pathways. But this time, he wasn't walking alone with his pain and anger. This time he was walking with the knowledge that his service mattered, that his sacrifice was remembered, and that the young soldiers who followed in his footsteps understood the weight of the legacy they carried. The tomb guard's response to his mockery hadn't been anger or retaliation. It had been understanding, respect, and an invitation to healing that would change Marcus's life forever. In trying to diminish the honor of another, Marcus had instead discovered that honor, like healing, grows stronger when it's shared rather than hoarded.